This case unfolds in the United Kingdom over several years. Let's introduce Neil Frederick Foden. Born in August of 1957, he was in his 60s when these events took place. Neil Foden had dedicated more than 3 decades of his life to the Welsh education system. His career kicked off in 1988 as an English teacher, and he quickly climbed the professional ladder. By 1997, he was the principal, running one of the largest high schools in North Wales. He became a prominent figure in the region's education scene, known for his strong opinions and frequent appearances in both local and national media. He was a go-to commentator on school policy and funding, and his opinion carried weight with politicians and journalists alike. In time, this public profile grew into an influence that perfectly suited his oversized ego. Colleagues recall him completely taking over meetings and single-handedly making decisions that should have been shared among senior staff and school board members. He even engineered systems that funneled all authority directly to him. He accomplished this by using short-term employment contracts and public shaming to maintain his grip. He managed his staff with an iron fist. Employees later revealed to investigators that they were terrified that speaking out about anything at all could cost them their careers. And it wasn't just the staff. Parents were afraid their children could be kicked out of the school. In one instance, an employment hearing found him guilty of bullying a teacher, earning him a 2-year formal warning on his record. But as it turned out, this reprimand was just a slap on the wrist. He was allowed to continue teaching and running the school. The bullying accusation stemmed from Neil falsifying exam results to make his school's performance look better. When another teacher caught on, he did the right thing and reported Neil. The whistleblower would later testify that after he exposed the test score issue, Neil subjected him to 4 years of relentless harassment. During the investigation, Neil somehow rallied nearly his entire staff, who all signed a letter pledging their loyalty to him. You could argue they were under duress, afraid they'd be his next target. But it also became clear that he had cultivated a loyal circle of yes-men. And this complete lack of opposition is what paved the way for some truly horrific crimes. Then, in 2018, the school's vice principal and head of student safety passed away. In the wake of this, Neil appointed himself to oversee student counseling and child protection duties. He had 0 child safety certifications and no relevant experience, but no one dared to question his decision. This move gave Neil absolute power and unchecked access to the school's most vulnerable students. Every time a student in crisis needed support, it became a chance for him to take advantage. You can probably see the dark path this is heading down. After this, Neil made national headlines across the UK. He heartlessly ordered that students with as little as 2 pence of unpaid lunch money be denied meals. The policy sparked a massive public outcry in the UK, and even drew condemnation from the famous English soccer player, Marcus Rashford. But this controversy would be nothing compared to what he was doing in broad daylight and behind the scenes. Now, before we go any further, there's something you need to know. An official review of this case revealed that major red flags started popping up as early as 2018. All told, there were 50 missed opportunities to stop this monster in his tracks. In 2018, staff members saw him messaging a student late at night from his personal account. That same student was later found asleep in his office, her head resting on his desk. Around that same time, another student reported seeing him walking alone with a female student on school grounds right before she got into his car. The police were called, but he simply explained it away, claiming he was just giving the girl a ride home. Neither student was ever interviewed, and the matter was dropped. As I said before, the school's head of student safety had died, and Neil had appointed himself to the position. From that moment on, every concern raised about his behavior landed right back on his own desk. The fox was now officially guarding the henhouse, a red flag that should have been caught. He started meeting with students alone in his office and other locations for what he called support sessions. Colleagues later told investigators he would keep the lights off and the blinds closed, claiming it was to protect confidentiality. In 2019, senior staff witnessed him escorting a student to police interviews, and even to medical appointments, all without parental consent. They warned him about professional boundaries, but a formal record of it was never created. In 2020, outside agencies, including the NSPCC and the SA Referral Center, made referrals concerning his behavior. Each one was dismissed for not meeting the threshold to launch a child protection investigation. During the nationwide lockdown that same year, he kept 2 students at the school without any approval. Senior colleagues discussed their unease, but later admitted they were just too afraid to report him. In 2021, while these concerns were still unresolved, he was promoted to an executive position at another school. It wasn't long before complaints started surfacing there as well, including reports of improper physical restraint and unprofessional contact with a female student. By early 2022, both staff and students were openly commenting on how he was frequently left alone with vulnerable girls. In March of 2023, his senior team finally issued a written warning, instructing him to meet with students only with the door open and the blinds raised, but he simply ignored their instructions. Then, in the summer of 2023, a social worker raised a concern that he had hugged a student without her consent. The report was bounced between different authorities for about 9 weeks, without anyone taking action. During that time, he continued to meet with students in private. The truth is, there were countless opportunities for someone to intervene, and if the governing bodies had just scratched below the surface, they would have uncovered a massive scandal. But finally, on September 6, 2023, a student disclosed to staff members that she had been in a relationship with Neil, and showed them messages and photos from her phone. This time, staff, the authorities, and most importantly the police, couldn't sweep it under the rug. It all began with a child who we'll refer to as Victim A. Before we go any further, there are 2 important things to note. First, the victims are identified by initials in official documents because they were under 18 at the time and are legally entitled to lifelong anonymity under UK law. And second, the events that follow are disturbing. Victim A enrolled at Neil's school in 2017 with known vulnerabilities, so a special protection plan was put in place for her. During school hours, the plan stipulated that her counseling and support were to be provided exclusively by female staff. But in January of 2019, an incident involving Victim A and a government agency required a responsible adult to be present, instead of a parent or an approved female staff member. Neil himself accompanied the victim to this meeting. For a principal overseeing a school of roughly 1,400 students, this was highly unusual, and of course, a direct violation of her protection plan. During this same incident, Neil gave Victim A his personal email address, so they could communicate directly. He then let the contact continue long after the initial issue was resolved, sometimes not responding for long stretches of time, which only made her more dependent on his attention. This is a classic grooming tactic. Neil later took Victim A to a doctor's appointment, and then to an SA referral center. He started meeting with her one-on-one, all under the guise of providing pastoral care. He even took her to a gynecologist appointment. Every one of these meetings took place without the knowledge or consent of Victim A's parents. Medical records were even addressed to him as if he were her legal guardian. His colleagues noticed his growing closeness to the vulnerable student and reported multiple boundary violations happening right on school grounds. He would spend long periods of time alone with her in his office. Staff later reported seeing her rest her head on his shoulder, watching them hold hands, and seeing him drive her to and from her appointments. Soon, she had his personal cell phone number. Other teachers told him to back off, but he completely ignored them. He started visiting Victim A's home and picking her up for late-night drives. He lied to her mother, telling her they were going to cake baking classes, which finished at 9:30. She became suspicious. Neil and Victim reportedly joked about how their interactions might look to others, and over time, everything intensified. They began messaging on WhatsApp and told her to delete their conversations. According to later accounts and digital evidence, the contact escalated. Whilst in the car, Neil would force Victim A to perform oral on him. She later reported that when she asked to stop, he forced her to continue. Neil also had a lifelong fetish for urine. So when he was in the car, he made his victims drink liters of water and then forced them to push down on their bladders. So they urinated for him. What he did with the urine wasn't disclosed. Messages showed him, telling her to tell nobody and to take it to her grave. The victim's search history included phrases such as, how to know if an older man likes you or is grooming you, and questions about potential prison sentences for SA. Victim A did have an awareness that she might be getting victimized. However, she was deep in and was young, so the abuse continued. Subsequent inquiries concluded that Victim A was not the only pupil affected. Another very vulnerable female that Neil was grooming was Victim C in early 2018. School records showed that he frequently messaged Victim C late at night on her personal email, and staff noted that she spent time in his office, including being seen asleep with her head on his desk on July 9, 2018. A pupil reported seeing him walking with a girl who then got into his car. The school identified this girl as Victim C, and we know exactly what happened to girls who got into his car. The police did question him, but they accepted the explanation that she needed a lift home. The pupil was never interviewed, and again, no further action was taken. Less than 2 weeks later, on July 24, 2018, the manager of the assisted living quarters where victim C lived told the police and social services that victim C was frequently left alone with Neil after school hours. The agencies again took no action, and the review recorded another missed opportunity. It's mind-blowing to think that these accusations of this strange behavior was going on with victim A. At the same time, during the lockdowns in April of 2020, he was known to have victim A and victim C in school without approval, and he taught them alone. Another important victim in this case is victim E. Victim E was actually the second complaint to come forward when the case was blown open. Neil referred to victim E as his little sex toy, and he made her call him Mr. P, not for PDF file but instead for perfect. This man, who was nothing short of a vile creep, he would often take victim E in his car driving around the countryside, under the guise of scouting out new hiking locations. Or at least that's what he later said. In fact, he was picking up victim E from school and taking her down quiet lanes so he could force himself upon her. The victim later said that when he did this, he would grip her tightly around the neck. Around this same time, Neil headed to a convention where he was a speaker for the children. Young People in Education Committee, however, the night before. He picked up victim E and took her to the hotel he was staying at and essayed her. Victim B was another innocent and vulnerable girl who was groomed. Using the very same tactics, this victim had their own therapy sessions, as Neil would call it. Victim B was once grabbed around the neck by Neil as he forced his hands up her leg and further up her thigh. Victim F was another who featured in the review, but not in the criminal case. He manipulated her into being infatuated with him. According to the review, she felt comforted by him. He would prepare her food, make her cups of tea, and host her alone in his office. Time and time again, Neil made her feel special, saying that she was important to him and that they had things in common. Victim F mentioned that Neil was a great listener and always made time for her, but he also had a habit of hugging her, which crossed a line. It violated safeguarding protocols, legal statutes, and victim F's personal boundaries. She never consented to these hugs. It was a calculated tactic Neil deployed. He would use the hugs as a way to initiate physical contact, a first step before escalating things even further. This was his way of testing the waters, just to see what he could get away with. Take victim G, for instance. On one occasion during the grooming process, he hugged her while her arms were pinned to her sides, leaving her unable to move. This would have been uncomfortable enough, maybe even claustrophobic. But what makes it so much more disturbing is that he held on for over 5 minutes. As you can imagine, this left victim G feeling absolutely terrified. Incidents like this were reported, but ultimately, those warnings fell on deaf ears. Victim G began avoiding Neil at all costs, so eventually, Neil demanded that she come to his office. She refused, but Neil just grabbed her and physically forced her into his office. Victim G was incredibly young, and no one knows what happened behind that closed door, as it never became part of the criminal case, possibly because she didn't want to relive it. In May of 2020, another victim, victim S, complained that Neil was getting way too handsy with her. She reported this to 2 teachers, and both of them said they would speak to Neil. However, it seems it was never properly followed up on. It was as if Neil was completely untouchable. We've only brought up a few victims here, but as we know, the list in the official review goes all the way to the letter S, meaning at least 19 students endured something they never should have. It was only a matter of time before his actions finally caught up with him. On September 6, 2023, right at the start of the school day, victim A came forward, disclosing she had been in a relationship with Neil Foden and showing WhatsApp messages and photographs to a member of the counseling staff. The messages were of an explicit nature and indicated that multiple crimes had occurred. At around 10:45, the authorities were notified. Victim A was so frightened that she hid in a school closet, and before long, Neil got wind of what was going down. Panicked, he went searching for the girl. He then deleted 17 images from his phone that he had received from victim A. These were incredibly graphic pictures. And just like that, the evidence was finally undeniable. The North Wilts police arrested him and launched a full-blown criminal investigation. Mr. Foden, unfortunately, I have to arrest you on suspicion of inappropriate contact with a minor and illegal communications with a minor. You don't have to say anything, but it might harm your defense if you don't mention something during questioning that you later rely on in court. Anything you do say can be used as evidence. Victim A then told the police everything. Devices were seized from Neil's home and his workplace. Call logs, messages, and data were all obtained, and following his arrest, other students began to come forward. Victim E, Victim B, Victim C, and many others. Investigators meticulously mapped the sequence of communications to show his patterns of contact and escalation. During police interviews, Neil gave no comment answers to every question, but the evidence was piling up. It only took 2 days for Neil to be charged and held in custody after pleading not guilty. A court date was scheduled for April 2024 at the Mold Crown Court, and the prosecution and defense teams got to work. Prosecutors opened by stating that Neil Foden used his position of authority to target students. They laid out a clear pattern: private messages that turned explicit, meetings arranged off-campus, and repeated instructions to keep things quiet. They built timelines corroborated by phone data, travel records, and school calendars, and one girl had even kept her own records because she knew something was deeply wrong. The brave young women then took the stand and connected the final dots for the jury. However, the defense fought back, urging the jurors to question the reliability of teenage memories and the real meaning behind the text messages. They argued there was no conclusive forensic proof, claiming that ordinary management decisions had been twisted to look sinister. On the stand, Neil denied every single accusation. He insisted his conduct was always professional and that these allegations were complete fabrications. But over 16 days, a mountain of evidence and testimony built up. On May 15, 2024, the jury found him guilty on 19 counts, including 12 for his crimes against children. He was also convicted of possessing illicit images of the victims. Sentencing was held on July 1, 2024. He was sentenced to 17 years in prison and ordered to serve at least 2/3 of that time before being eligible for parole. The judge stated that Neil had preyed on vulnerable young girls, abusing his position of trust. Police later confirmed he was permanently barred from ever teaching again. Some might argue that in the end, justice was served. But many others feel that too many people looked the other way, and that the rot of incompetence runs deep within the school system, child protective services, and law enforcement. The case of Neil is one of the most maddening in recent history. There's a long list of victims today, all because no one was willing to raise the alarm. It's chilling to think that in this day and age, someone like Neil could climb the ladder and operate unchecked for so many years. There were 50 opportunities to stop him, and not one person took action.